Fantastic. Thank you, Jennifer. All right. Thanks so much for having me. I am thrilled to be presenting to you today, and I'd love to hear any comments you have. If something seems urgent, go ahead and put it in the chat box, or even if it's not urgent, that's the cool thing about the chat box. You can ask questions anytime during the talk, so you don't forget them. And then when it's appropriate, probably at the end, I can answer them. So I'm going to talk about adapting New Hampshire farms to climate change, and it does go a little bit beyond New Hampshire into the Northeast and a little bit beyond farms into forestry as well. So I am with the USDA Northeast Climate Hub, and as part of that, I'm with the Forest Service as well. The Climate Hub is cross USDA. We work primarily with the Natural Resources Conservation Service and the Agricultural Research Service, in addition to the Forest Service, and then very close partnerships with our land-grant universities, our tribes, some non-government organizations, both private and nonprofits, states, and other federal agencies like NOAA. And our overall mission is to deliver tools and practices and share information that's science-based and specific to our region on how farmers and land managers can achieve their goals in the changing climate. There are 10 hubs across the country, and this map shows them all. We are up here in the Northeast, and Durham is highlighted because that is where the headquarters, so to speak, are in the Northeast region. We also have several folks on our Northeast Hub team who are throughout the region. So this is my overview of the talk today, and I've already checked off that first bullet, which is talking about the Northeast Climate Hub. Then I'm going to get a little bit into how the climate is changing, and I focused specifically on New Hampshire. However, a lot of it does apply throughout the Northeast, and there's our Northeast region again, off there to the right. And then briefly, I'll talk about the impacts to agriculture and a little bit to forestry as well. But what I want the primary part of the talk to be is on the resources that the Climate Hub and our partners have developed and are trying to get out there into the hands of the people who can use them. All right, diving into climate change information. A lot of you have this base knowledge already, and I know this is the third, I believe, in a series about climate change. So hopefully this is just a different way of hearing the same information, but maybe there's some new little tidbits. The thing about climate change that I find as I learn more and more about it is that the details really matter. So everybody seems to understand the concept of global warming and things getting hotter, but that means different things for different parts of our country and of our globe, and it also means it's also important when you're thinking about things like what the impacts are. So overall, how the climate is changing and expected to change. This is a good report to read, the U.S. Global Change Research Program. Climate Science Special Report. Globally, we're up 1.8 degrees in the last century, but it's really the more important piece here is that this is the warmest period that we've had in modern civilization, and that it seems to be accelerating. The weather extremes are a big deal across the globe. The models are showing that this is going to continue. So we have the ocean temperatures are up, we have acidity increasing, sea levels have risen 7 to 8 inches since the start of the last century, and it's like 3 inches since the early 1990s. So that's again, that shows it kind of accelerating. We have heat waves and floods. A lot of impacts from these changes. Diving into New Hampshire specifically, we've actually warmed more rapidly than the rest of the US and the rest of the world. It's up 3 degrees Fahrenheit. And the important thing here is that our minimum temperatures are really what's changing. So the temperatures are up in winter and at night. The nighttime lows are increasing at the rate of about 1 degree per decade. That obviously has some implications. The summer maximum hasn't changed yet. So we've seen a lot of variability across the last decades, but the greatest number of hot days per year has occurred in the last decade. And our maximum daily temperature, for example, in November has increased. So we're getting some earlier snow melt in the spring. We're seeing that, and earlier leaf out, and then this increased rainfall intensity, as well as about 1 to 4 feet of sea level rise is expected in the coming years with the current situation. Okay, I'm going to dive into this a little bit more. One of the biggest things is these intense rain events. So these heavy rainfalls, which is defined as more than 2 inches of rain in 24 hours, have become they've become more frequent in recent years, and they've become heavier. So the amount of rain is greater, and the number of these downpours is greater. And this, I love these maps because, boy, look at where the concentration of that increase in frequency is. It's just right there in New Hampshire, so in the northern part of the Northeast. I call these downpours. The part of the reason for that is that storms are actually moving through more slowly, and so that means that they're dumping more rain in one place. So that's where you get those heavy storms. And that happens because the degree, for every degree of warming, the air contains 7% more water vapor, and so the warmer atmosphere holds more water and can dump more when it rains. So the combination of holding more and the slower storms means you get that bigger, the bigger rains. So here's one of my favorite pictures or images that just show some of the changes that we see that don't even necessarily make sense. I call it the Wacky Jet stream. The jet stream, of course, is air currents that move from west to east, and those are becoming more, they're meandering more, or kind of becoming the stronger wave-like pattern. It's carrying cold air to the south and warm air to the north when we're not expecting it. One of the questions that scientists have been asking is, will there be more drought in the Northeast? We don't know. It's showing, the trends are showing that it's possible. Bigger storms may leave us with longer periods between storms, or more dry times in between the large storms. And then we also have the warmer temperatures that lead to more evaporative demand. So I left in this drought monitor from October because, of course, it's not very interesting right now. There is a little bit of drought in the US, but not in the Northeast. So, but I highly suggest these drought monitors for looking at current drought conditions. Here's another document that I suggest if you were all in the room with me now, I would hand this out. I am a huge proponent of this NOAA state summary. You can just Google state summaries, New Hampshire, or NOAA, New Hampshire, and these will come up. They have them for every state. And what I love about this is it goes into the details for New Hampshire. So again, those details are important. And it's 4 pages, so it's fairly simple. Oh, look, I have one for New York right here. And if you can see me, you can see it's got graphs, really, really simple way to just get a good handle on what's happening in your state in about 20 minutes. And then you can keep referring back to it. So a lot of the information that I get come from these. Okay, so I'm going to move into impacts. this is focusing on impacts to agriculture. So with the warmer winter temperatures that I mentioned, and the possible warmer summer temperatures that's been variable, but that have been happening here and there, you see that there's possibilities for new plants, perhaps also more competition from southern species. You could have earlier planting, but then if you move down to the bottom bullet, that increase in precipitation causes more flooding and can delay planting. So it's like there's opportunities and vulnerabilities that keep happening. Because at first glance, it's thinking, okay, warmer, wetter, that's, you've got this. We have water when the rest of the world won't, because there's a lot of drought that may be happening or maybe increasing across the globe. And in the Northeast, we have this increase in precipitation, in rain, really, which could mean that we are not having that limiting factor yet. We're getting it all at once. So how do we store it? How do we figure out how to deal with the floods and the extreme moisture, as well as when we have too little? And then I mentioned the possibilities of insects overwintering with the increase of pests and weeds as well. So perhaps there's new opportunities there, but then also the challenges that come with it. And then the one more thing is that we have that earlier snowmelt, or the possible longer growing season, but then the issue that we've seen several times in the last couple of decades is that we then get a frost, which is at a timing that is normal. So if you have temperatures warm up especially in the southern part of our region, in February or March, and then you get a frost, then those plants are more susceptible to damage. Okay. Speaking of damages, the causes of loss, this is Farm Service Agency data for crop disaster assistance program, and you'll see here that in the Northeast, in the last, well, this is fairly recent data, the biggest issues have been drought and flooding. So you've got the too much and too little water. And then of course there's a decent amount there, a chunk that's caused by heat as well. So you can imagine that these may be they're already an issue, and they may be becoming more of an issue, which indicates a need to assess vulnerabilities and deal with the risks. So with that in mind, our Climate Hub organized these two papers, which are in the Climatic Change, January 2018, I believe. One of them may actually be in a different issue. They're open access. You should be able to find them based on their titles or their authors. And the idea here was to look at what is most vulnerable in the Northeast in regards to livestock, and then what can we do about it? And then secondly, what about the crop production in a changing climate? So these are fairly comprehensive, and probably one of the best resources in the scientific literature in recent years for the Northeast. There's a synthesis of the vulnerabilities. One of the things that we talk about is what are our strategies for adapting to these changing conditions. And a lot of times these are the same old things that have been promoted for years, for other reasons, that without even mentioning climate change. So promoting soil health is good for many co-benefits, but also can protect the land and the farming and the agricultural systems when it comes to the changing climate. With all that extreme weather that we are seeing and that we'll continue to see, there's a sense that there needs to be protection for crops and also livestock from these extremes. So that's when you get into things like the use of more high tunnels, considering ventilation systems, protecting the farmlands with riparian buffers, protecting against drought with expanded irrigation, and then bigger picture things like shifting production zones away from flood areas, or considering where the frost-prone areas are to protect them from those early, regularly scheduled frosts that occur after the early blooming. And I will get into this a little more later on, but we have this concept of needing to support decision making. So as things become less predictable with the wacky weather, there's a greater need for integrating weather data, pest management, feeding management, nutrient management, adapting varieties into decision support. So how do we make those decisions based on the current and expected climate data? And lastly, I'll mention that we do think about this carbon sequestration, how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which is, of course, an issue with, or an opportunity really, with increasing organic matter in soils and through restoring forested areas, as well as manure management. So I'm going to pause for just a second. Are there any, I'm going to move into resources next, but are there any pressing questions? Oops. I can't actually see. There we go. All right. I see that Sam has put all the links to those resources. That's fantastic. Okay, no pressing questions yet. So next I'm going to dive into the resources, and then we can get into questions after that, if there are any. So the Climate Hub and our partners, a lot come from our partners, have been developing resources over the past 6 years. And finally, I feel like we have enough to talk about and to send you to our website to find these projects, find out more about these projects, find out, print off some of the case studies and fact sheets, and get the information. I'm going to talk about each of these different types of resources. Economic case studies. We've done a few of these. These are, there's the long version and the short version. The short version is about 4 pages, and we have worked with NRCS and other partners to really dig into some economic questions of what is viable, so we can talk about how to adapt a farm to the changing conditions, but the farmer probably won't do it unless it can make some economic sense in the short term and the long term production strategies. So this one, for example, is on, does irrigation pay? Irrigation is not widely used in the small farms in the Northeast, and this particular case study shows an example where in the current and expected climate, it probably does make sense, at least in some cases, for installing irrigation. We have a webinar series coming, and we have one coming up. This is our next one on January 17th to talk about Open Team, which is a super fascinating new project that Doran Cox has started with all of these partners. And we have backlogged climatewebinars.net archived, I believe is the word that I meant, several webinars that you can go back and watch on various topics, all related to climate change and adapting farms in the Northeast. We have several fact sheets on cover crops and grazing. We also have research briefs where we take research papers and try to turn them into one-pagers so that you can read them, read about the research in a little bit quicker or faster way. We try to focus in on what matters to the farmer or to the extension agent. This one is a fairly new one. It's a little bit on the longer side because Rhode Island was doing some research on certain summer cover crops, teff and millet, and how they can keep the ground covered for longer. And this is actually one of those opportunities that arose when Rhode Island is seeing longer growing seasons. But it also protects the soil health by keeping the ground covered for longer. Another fact sheet that we haven't actually developed yet, or it's been developed but it hasn't been published yet, on climate change and aquaculture in Long Island Sound. University of Connecticut worked on this one, where they have found ways that their farmers have found ways to modify practices to deal with a pathogenic bacteria that's resulted from, well, they think has resulted from the increase in water temperatures.
Hey, Erin, we've got a related question. Someone wants to know if the other regional climate hubs are producing similar resources.
Oh, I love that question. I love to talk about the other climate hubs. Yes, although they're all doing it a little differently. So I'm trying to think of some good examples. The Caribbean Climate Hub, for example, has some podcasts. So does the Southern Plains. They've been working on presenting their materials differently. They do a lot of workshops. Everybody's focus is a little different. The Southwest and the Northern Plains have developed some fantastic tools to help with grazing, for instance. Yes, so looking on the General Climate Hub website will kind of take you through some of the various resources that they've developed as well. We all work together, but we all try to meet the needs of our region constituents. All right, I'm going to continue. That was a welcome break. I'm going to continue running through some resources that we have. Just giving you a sense, really, this is not meant to be comprehensive, but to give you a sense of the variety of materials. This one is one that University of New Hampshire folks worked on with us. We really just provided the funding, but this is a manual for growing day neutral strawberries in New Hampshire, which is getting at that idea of our variety selection is changing with the changing climate. Gosh, those strawberries look good, don't they? Wow. Okay, I guess it's almost lunchtime. So workshops. We do quite a few workshops, and this one is tomorrow and Thursday in Burlington. And I will say that walk-in registration is welcome, or day of registration is welcome. So if you want to drive up to Burlington either tonight or tomorrow morning, you would be welcome. The idea behind this workshop is to really focus in on how specialty crop producers are considering to improve their water use efficiency, and thinking about things like water storage and irrigation. So it's a very, very focused topic, and we've gotten a lot of feedback that works well for our audience. Here's one that we put on a couple of years ago in Syracuse, where we worked across the border in Canada on discovering what's out there for tools. We really focused this workshop on the tools for decision making and that cross-border application. And the proceedings for this is on our website. Probably the most robust proceedings I've ever been a part of is this Northeast Climate Hub Partners meeting, which was in March a couple of years ago, and we recorded all the talks, so you can listen to them as if they were podcasts, or some of them are videos of the presentations as well, and several are, or all of them have the PowerPoints up. Coming up in this March is the workshop on urban forestry and how to build resilience. University of the District of Columbia and American Forest are co-leading this workshop, where we hope that the audience will walk away with tools for building that resilience. Okay, one more workshop. This is a Connecting the Dots for Pollinator Conservation workshop, which happened this July. There was an educational field day that was hosted by the University of New Hampshire Extension. And I brought this one up because there's a cool video, a really nice video that's recapping the event and brings out the salient points of the event, just in a short little video. So I think that's worth watching. You can find that on our website. Couple of bigger projects that we are working on. This is actually an entire curriculum that the Hub partnered with several of our land grants and farmers and others, nonprofits as well, to develop a really robust program for peer-to-peer learning. So the design for this is that farmers and technical service providers or agricultural advisors apply to a program, and then they go through this process of learning through this curriculum and through learning modules, and they then take that information and teach it to their peers throughout the program. And the learning materials are already developed and they're found on this website. The programs themselves have not yet been piloted, although we have just gotten to the point where we're starting to apply for funding to run these programs. And the curricula are in there's actually 4 sets. One is for vegetable and berry production, another is tree fruit, then we have one in forestry and one for dairy. So depending on the interest of the farmers and the agricultural advisors, they can take one or more of those 4 tracks. Similarly, we worked with university partners who led this project on called Climate Stewards. This is a similar concept where the idea is peer-to-peer learning, but this one is more in the vein of a master gardener program where stewards come to learn about climate adaptation and mitigation, and then teach their peers and bring to their community some progress in certain projects, much like the master gardener program, where they become the expert in their community. This is being piloted in New York through Cornell, who also was the lead on the development of the project. Some of the research projects that are happening in conjunction with the Hub, this one is a decision game, a serious game, where farmers play to determine what they might do given different flood probabilities. So this helps researchers understand how farmers make decisions. This is a tool that helps evaluate other tools. So this is something that's being developed to guide the tool developers in becoming more of co-producers with end users. So the questions kind of lead the developer down the track of, are we involving stakeholders as we are developing decision support tools? And the end point there, hopefully, is that some of the tools that are coming out to help agricultural advisors and farmers and foresters and land managers can actually be more useful because they're being developed with their needs in mind. All right, I've just got a couple of more, and then I've got a really cool tour to show you. So up here in the upper right corner is a weather station, and the Hub has been promoting the use of these weather stations. and connecting them into networks that can read the weather information or summarize the weather information for the user. This particular one is set up in Seneca Nation, and there are there tribal units that there were set up across the country to help tribes work on the decision making related to weather. So the idea is that if you can access weather data, it can help you make decisions on things like planting and irrigation and grazing and when to fertilize. So this particular project that the slide is highlighting also connected the youth to the weather station and to the concept of the changing weather and how to use the weather and the changing climate to make decisions on the ground. And one of the ideas that sprung from or that helped really develop this concept or this project is that the youth will then take this idea of changing weather and making decisions to their future and also to their families. And in this case, help their tribe plan for a sustainable future. This farm is at Seneca Nation is a new farm, and they are really paying attention to how they can establish a system of that's resilient to the climate and what's expected. We're looking at the impacts of saltwater flooding on farmland. This is more of a mid-Atlantic project. Also investigating how saltwater intrusion and inundation affects forests on the East Coast. Again, more of a mid-Atlantic project. We have a workshop coming up in January on this topic. And then a new project is investigating the economic benefits of soil health. We work with university partners on all of these. Last year, we were able to run this project called GradCap, where we brought together graduate students from the universities across the Northeast and built a network where they could meet each other and discuss their research topics and also learn from each other. It was all the students who were working in climate adaptation and in agriculture and forestry across various topics and spaces, but they had enough in common that they were able to learn from each other. And they did end up even submitting a paper on how valuable this process was for their development, and also not just personally, but how it was going to help them affect change in their future. All right, so I have one more thing to share with you. I think it's maybe the most fun thing. We developed virtual tours, and we have about 20 of these. Well, there's a few that are still in production, so we don't quite have 20 up on our website yet. But if you go to our website and go to demonstrations, and then there's a whole bunch of these across the Northeast. There's one for just about every state. And what we did was we toured farms and forests and lands where climate adaptation is happening or where they're addressing some kind of climate impact. I'm going to switch to a different screen so that I can show you. There we go. And we used 360-degree photography. So now we're in West Virginia. Can you guys all feel like you're in West Virginia right now? Do you all see this? There's green grass. There's solar panels. I think those are solar panels. So you're taking a tour of this farm, and if you were to actually go through step by step, you would actually see and read these embeds. See, we're on a berry farm near Morgantown, West Virginia. Then you can actually pretend you're there and learn about the ways that they're adapting to climate change on their farms. So if you use this on a mobile device, you can actually, I don't know if you guys have seen this before, probably, where you can twirl around with your phone in your hand and it looks as if you're actually looking at this berry farm in West Virginia. I'm going to show you one more. Oops. There we go. This is a dairy cropping system in Pennsylvania. So Penn State is showing some of the research that Penn State's doing on dairy cropping and cover crops in different forage types. You can actually go into a greenhouse on a cold day, or pretend to be riding a tractor over here. And there's quite a bit of information in these tours, and then there's also videos that help give you the tour so that you're actually hearing from the people. So you have a tour guide as you go. There's several videos in each of these. So those are our virtual tours or demonstrations, and like I said, there are several on our website. Let's see if I can go back to, whoops, there we go. And lastly, I wanted to give a shout out for our newsletter. These are very robust newsletters. They only come quarterly, but they really give you the highlights of the new resources that are coming out and the events that are happening and the webinars and all of those things. So I would hope that you could all subscribe if you're interested in, if you're not already, subscribe to our newsletter called The Quarterly Harvest. And then lastly, I'm going to bring up the this final screen with all these websites, or at least you can get an idea of what they are. So where to go to explore the tours. There's our website, of course, and how to sign up for our newsletter. We have a listserv. The dream there was to get conversations going about climate adaptation in different sectors of agriculture in the Northeast. So we have developed several of those. They have not been been used very actively, but you can change that because all it really takes is somebody starting to post and conversations rolling. And then of course our webinars, and we have a Twitter account as well. So do we have any questions or comments, discussion that you want to engage in?
Thank you, Erin. That was really great. So just a reminder to folks who may be logged on after I gave this information, this is Jennifer from the New Hampshire Food Alliance. You can ask a question by clicking on the chat icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It'll pop up a box and then you can type a message that everyone will be able to see. So feel free to leave a question or comment there. And while you're thinking, I'll just mention that all of the webinars that we've done have been recorded and are available on our website, and we'll include the link to those there. And this one will be added to the list there with the slides as well. And we're currently taking a break right now from the webinars, at least for the next month, to reassess and see if we're going to continue doing them, if we're going to take on a different project, but we'll keep you posted. So feel free to type in some questions. We have one question here. Which type of resources have been the most used or successful at this point?
Oh, I love that question. It's a good one. So I don't know the answer. I want to know the answer very much. Um, I would say that our webinars have been, especially since Jennifer was questioning the effectiveness of your webinars, they have been well attended. We work on getting CEUs for participants, and we get a lot of good feedback, a lot of variety or diversity rather of people. And then I would also say that by archiving them, and tracking the viewing of those archived webinars, we get at least double the participants. So that has been very successful, and also using the conservation webinar portal has helped kind of expand our interest in our and participation in our webinars. So we get about 250, 250, and then we get another 250 in the while it's in the archives, which is a pretty good reach for us for webinars. I think that's a very different type of resource than some of the fact sheets or the virtual tours. I would love to see, I'd love to be able to measure who's using the virtual tours, and we don't have quite the same ability to track that. We've been trying to. But there are a lot of effort. Those are a very robust resource, and a lot of effort goes into those. So we'd love to try to promote those more and figure out how to get them to be used.
Great. A couple more questions here. What are some of the greatest challenges you've faced in getting reluctant farmers on board with incentive programs?
So we don't work directly with farmers very often. We more work with extension and with other agricultural advisors. I probably should have said that in the beginning with the mission of our hub. When we started 6 years ago, one of the very first things we thought of is how do we reach our audience, because we're here to assist farmers and land managers. And we said, you know what, there's networks that are already set up, and there's the land grant extension system, and there's NRCS technical service providers. Let's go through those folks, and then they deal with the reluctant farmers. Although I will say in the Northeast, we have been very fortunate in working with the innovative in the kind of early adopters. There seems to be a widespread interest in these topics. I would also like to say that one of the methods that could work with reluctant farmers is this idea of the climate adaptation curriculum, because if there is a true peer-to-peer learning program that is like the curriculum is set up to do, then it's not us talking to the reluctant farmers, it's their neighbor, it's their friend who has already tried this adaptation practice, and then they're telling they're sharing that information with, and they're outreaching with their peers. So hopefully that is one of the methods that could work.
Great. Another question here. We have a group of small and beginning farmers in Coos County interested in hosting a presentation on adaptation. Who should we reach out to?
We would be very interested in hearing from you. So you can definitely send me an email. I also have, I'm working on a small and beginning farmer grant with the University of Vermont that your group may be able to tie into as well. So that could be a good connection to have. And then, yeah, we would love to be involved in that.
Great. One more question here we have. What have been the most successful collaborations with state extension partners? And what are additional ways in which extension could help with the tool adoption, information dissemination, etc.?
We have had both successes and failures. I will admit to that. One of the things that I recently met with a group of both extension and agricultural research station folks, and they criticized the hub for being too focused on climate. Which of course that's what we do, but their point was well made, because what they were saying is that when we say, hey, what are you doing as extension professionals to help your clientele deal with climate change? They don't know how to answer that question in general. I mean, some definitely do. This is the feedback we got from them. But if you just ask them, what are you doing to work with your farmers in your region, you find out that they are actually addressing climate concerns. And that was one of the biggest breakthroughs, and that made a lot of sense to me. So once we kind of change the way that we're talking about things, then we're able to reach better communicate with the extension folks who are then already well connected with the folks on the ground. So one of the more successful programs that we just ran through the University of New Hampshire was a mini grant program where once the extension folks realized that we were trying to find out more what they're doing, and then we can connect it back to climate, then we had a bunch of applications. We were able to fund most of them. So that Pollinator workshop that I mentioned was funded through that program, where we were able to kind of offer some climate connection to the work that they're doing.
Great. Well, Erin's email is listed there in the chat. So if you have any questions later on or want to get in touch with her about a project, feel free to do that. And if you have any questions about the Food Alliance or any of our work, we have our statewide gathering coming up on March 10th, 2020. And our website is up for that. So we'll put that link in there too. And I think that's about it. If there are no other questions, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much, Erin, for presenting.
Thanks for having me.